Hello, everyone. Welcoming you to today's webinar. My name is Robin Marquis. I'm the program lead for the New York Clean Transportation Prizes, an $85 million initiative that was announced on April 20th, where we launched a series of 3 prize competitions that we'll get into a bit more today. But just wanted to welcome you all and cover a few housekeeping items first as everyone's joining. So you may have noticed that we have a poll up right now. Just curious why you're attending today's webinar. Please respond, and then we'll display the results after a few more minutes. Also want to note that this webinar is being recorded. We will be posting it on the websites. So each of the individual challenges has a resources page. So as you can see on our meeting procedures slide here, you can go to one of the specific challenges, its respective resource page to get both the recording of today's webinar and additional resources available for those that are participating in the prizes. Also want to mention that we have the chat function up. So if you are looking to make a connection, if you're interested in looking for partners, you can put in your name and organization into the chat to kind of raise your hand for others to raise awareness that you're looking for a partner. Also noting that we will be doing a Q&A at the end after the 3rd speaker. So if you have any questions during the remarks, we'll have the Q&A feature. We'll be fielding those questions. And then if there are some questions that we're unable to get to during the webinar, there is contact information on each of the prize websites to address additional inquiries as you're preparing to propose to the prizes. So the website for the prizes is nycleantransportationprizes.org. So that's where you'll find all the information on the proposal, the rubric, these resources that we mentioned, and where you can get more information on the 3 specific challenges. And from there, you can go to a website for each individual challenge. So the 3 of the 3 prizes are the Clean Neighborhoods Challenge, the Electric Mobility Challenge, and the Electric Truck and Bus Challenge. So for each of those on their respective websites, we have the full details of what the prize's objectives are and how you can apply. So for today, we're offering the first of our 3 educational webinars to help provide additional background information for those of you who are looking to participate in the prizes and for more resources on electrification and some trends in the industry. So for today's 3 speakers, we have Bret, I know you're going to need to correct this, but I'm going to try. Bret Reischborn, Section Manager of Electric Vehicles at Con Edison. We have Ben Prohaska, Executive Director of the Electrification Coalition, and Mandy Bishop, Deputy Director of Public Service and the Smart Columbus Program Manager in Columbus, Ohio. So Bret leads the design and operations for Con Ed's Electric Vehicle Incentives Program. Previously in her work at Con Edison, she focused on deploying energy storage and other distributed energy resources to meet grid needs and develop novel business models for leveraging storage to support utility operations and customers. Prior to joining Con Edison in 2014, Bret completed her PhD and a research fellowship in physics at Columbia University. And our second speaker, Ben, joined the Electrification Coalition in October 2012 as the Director of Strategic Initiatives to help lead the Outside the Beltway initiatives and now serves as their Executive Director. Ben has spent more than a decade working in environmental, human rights, and voter engagement efforts. His experience includes leadership roles at Save Darfur Coalition, the Colorado Environmental Coalition, the New Voters Project, and the U.S. Public Interest Research Group. And our third speaker today is Mandy, who joined the City of Columbus in July 2017. She uses her 22 years of industry experience with an emphasis on complex project management to lead the delivery of the USDOT, Vulcan, and American Climate Change Challenge grant-funded programs. She oversees finance, human resources, and Vision Zero for the department. Prior to joining Columbus, Mandy was a senior project manager with GPD Group, managing public improvements for the city of Dublin. She holds a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from the Ohio State University and is a registered Ohio professional engineer and surveyor intern. So with that, going to transition to our first speaker, Bret.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for inviting me to join this event. Very excited to be helping to kick off this really innovative and interesting program. I am Bret Reischborn Shenarud. You did a pretty good job with the last name. I am section manager of electric vehicle execution and operations. So I focus on designing and implementing our EV infrastructure incentive programs at Con Edison. For those of you that aren't familiar with Con Ed, our territory encompasses New York City and Westchester County, which is a much more suburban area north of the city. So our territory really ranges from very dense urban to very typical suburban. At the most dense spots, there's 70,000 people per square mile. So think Midtown Manhattan, and 2 gigawatts of electric load density in those densest areas. So definitely presents some unique challenges, but also some unique opportunities I'll talk about a bit later. Across our customer base, we serve about 10 million customers. Electricity, we deliver electricity. We don't, in most cases, generate it. And we also deliver gas and produce and deliver steam to some of the customers in our territory. And we're really extremely excited about all that is happening in transportation electrification across New York State right now. We've had demonstration projects and other pilots going, but it seems like in the last couple years, really momentum has picked up quite a bit across a number of initiatives. And really what's driving all of this is the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. That is the state law that encodes our climate targets. And the ones driving activities in transportation are the greenhouse gas reduction goals of 40% by 2030 and 85% reduction by 2050. And it's very clear with transportation contributing over a third to emissions in the state, and the only growing sector in greenhouse gas emissions in the end use, that we really need ambitious, bold programs across all vehicle classes if we're going to be able to achieve these greenhouse gas reduction goals. And what that means in terms of vehicles on the road, across New York State, there's a goal to 2025 that's focusing on cars and vans, light duty vehicles. Just to give you a sense, we need a 12-fold increase in Con Ed's territory alone, from 20,000 to 238,000 cars. So really aggressive goals on the light duty side. And then in the medium and heavy duty sector, recently New York signed on to a multi-state agreement with a goal of 30% of sales be electric by 2030 and 100% by 2050. So a lot needs to be done to hit those targets. And of course, under the CLCPA, one of the key aspects is bringing these climate benefits to what's referred to as disadvantaged communities. These are low and moderate income customer areas and environmental justice areas. And so this prize competition is really important because it's going to be bringing a focus onto the medium and heavy duty sector and delivering those benefits to disadvantaged communities. There's been a lot of activity in the last couple years. First of all, there have been some operating incentive programs. So we started in New York State with all the utilities implementing a DC fast charger per plug incentive program. Con Edison has a Smart Charge New York off-peak incentive program. And other New York State utilities have also proposed managed charging programs. So a lot happening on the operating cost side. And then on the infrastructure side, in 2020, in July, an order was issued by the PSC for all the New York State utilities to launch light duty make ready programs. So this is incentives to bring the service from the grid to the charger, although not the charger itself, for those light duty vehicles like cars and small vans, small SUVs. And so those programs have been launched, they're underway. In the state, the goal is 55,000 charging plugs be installed by 2025. So when I spoke about bold and ambitious programs, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And all of the New York State utilities also launched a pilot program for Make Ready for medium and heavy duty. But in that order came also this authorization of this prize competition. And this is going to help sort of address sectors that aren't addressed at scale in that July 2020 order. Now, in terms of the electric vehicle market, especially in New York State, I would say a lot of progress has been made in the last years on the light duty side. We now have large scale funding for the light duty infrastructure. The vehicles availability and maturity are very well established. And even the economics on the light duty side are very positive. We're sort of around the corner or maybe a few years out, depending on which projections you look at, for cost parity on light duty vehicle cost. And of course, the total cost of ownership, taking into account the lower sort of electric fueling costs and maintenance costs, is already positive. On the medium and heavy duty side, there's a little bit more work ahead. And you can see that even just in the much lower vehicle adoption rates we see in Con Ed territory. The number of vehicle options is expanding, and certainly for some vehicle types like school and transit buses, medium-sized delivery trucks, or large delivery vans, there are more and more options, and the number of options are growing, but there still are not necessarily road-tested, road-proven vehicles at all vehicle classes. And additionally, there aren't quite the same financial incentives at full scale like we have in the light duty Make Ready program and those operating cost incentives. But there's also additional challenges I would call out in medium and heavy duty, where the fleets really need to come to a total sort of paradigm shift in the way they're thinking about procurement and running their operations. They need help selecting vehicles. They need to understand the charging infrastructure, the costs and the timelines, and all sort of the factors to weigh in designing and implementing that charging infrastructure. And what does it really mean to think about their operating costs when they're fueling with electricity rather than gas? So there's definitely also a need for education and supporting the fleets as they sort of face this transition to electrify. And of course, with the focus on bringing the benefits to disadvantaged communities, we do see some challenges in the early days with, especially under the light duty program, having fewer of our customers, actually our LMI customers, owning and driving those light duty vehicles. But we've been working to be creative in these early days, thinking, as I imagine a lot of the folks on the phone will be thinking about as they consider what they might propose, how we can reach these customer segments in other ways, whether it's targeting specific locations that have that sort of EJ history, or thinking about customer segments. They might not own the vehicles, but for example, transit or rideshare, where you really can try to find meaningful ways to bring the benefits to those disadvantaged communities. I'll transition now to talk a bit about how applicants can think about working with utility, what it means to plan a project and what the impacts might be on the grid. For Con Edison's point of view, we're very committed to supporting transportation electrification transition, and we're excited about what we might see developed under these prize competitions. And really our role here is not going to be as a project partner. We wouldn't be on a project team, but rather we would play a more support role. Part of that is going to be helping applicants understand sort of how their project might impact the grid and how to plan accordingly. I'll talk a bit more about that. And really what we bring is the key platform, which is the electric grid that's going to enable any of these electrification initiatives. And I think some sort of key things I want to point out as you're thinking about planning a project and considering various partnership and business models and who's sort of going to install and own and operate. There's sort of two cost buckets to consider. One is the upfront costs, and of course there's going to be costs at the charger site, the customer property, as it were. And there also may potentially be some grid upgrades that the customer or the site developer would be responsible for. And again, our role here is to do the analysis for the grid impact and help applicants understand what the implications are in terms of cost as well as timeline. And then the second factor is the operating costs. And there, again, we can advise on the different rate types that are available. And across our commercial rates, we have 3 different types. So which rate types might be a best fit, and some estimates of what the operating costs really may look like for a particular project type. This is to keep in mind, you want to start working with the utility so costs and the potential to plan your project. And then once you're ready to actually initiate, exactly what the utility is going to need to do any analysis. And then we can provide estimated costs and also timeline for the project install. So working with the utility early will really help you with planning your schedule as well as your budget, and provide that reality check on which sites might be best for implementing your particular model. Moving on to some challenges, not to be too much of a downer, but especially Con Ed has a fairly dense urban environment, but some of these challenges apply across the board. Anywhere you bring a large amount of kW load increases, there's always a potential for grid upgrades, and those can, although don't always, result in customer cost. And those also can take up to a year or more. Additionally, there's just the cost of real estate in New York, limitations on space. So even if you have a adequate grid capability, what's capable at the site. And when you work in New York City, if you have plans to work on the curbside or in the street, you're always going to be working with the Public Design Commission. So leaving you with some of those hopefully helpful pieces of advice, I'm going to pass it on to the next speaker.
Thanks, Bret. So this is Robin again. Before we transition to Ben, our second speaker, just want to note that at the beginning of this, we had called out you could use the chat function if you want to put out there that you're looking or interested in partnering with someone. And we are seeing some of those coming into either the host or the panelists. So in the chat box, just make sure that where you're sending the message, there's a drop down, and if you pick everyone, then everyone will be able to see it. So we have been trying to relay the messages that we're getting here on the back end, but just want to make sure that you're aware of where the message is going so that other people see it as well. So with that, going to transition now to Ben from the Electrification Coalition.
Great. Well, thanks, Robin. And, it's just to echo a little bit of what Britt, and I will not attempt to say the last name, but it's really great to be a part of this. It's really great to see the leadership from the state of New York on this. And, I think I have my first slide, which is just up, and it's talking about the future of electric. And I think as a premise, I want to just put in people's head one of the things that I really feel is happening, which is it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And so programs like the New York Clean Transportation Prizes are an example of ways that we're going to accelerate the when. And I think the opportunity to partner with communities, with OEMs, and manufacturers, and with NGOs is a really great opportunity to kind of do a pull the world together to create a response to a really big challenge and a really big opportunity. So next slide. So if you aren't familiar with the Electrification Coalition, we are a national organization that works to accelerate the adoption of plug-in electric vehicles across the country. We have sort of a DNA of working on pilots to scale. So we ran, and it's flagged at the bottom there, but we ran a EV accelerator community a bunch of years ago in northern Colorado, which is a great opportunity, and it still exists. We also replicated that in New York as a project and funded by NYSERDA, which basically helped to accelerate EV adoption in Rochester, New York. We also work on freight, and we have a freight and delivery goods pilot program. We're working with Nestle and several other partners on that around some freight electrification. We support the American Cities Climate Challenge as a technical advisor for, which is funded by Bloomberg. And then we also kind of work at the intersection of policy and implementation at the local, state, and federal level. Next slide. So, why electric? Why is this the thing now? I think, in some ways, if you're on this, you probably know, but I will offer a few pieces, which is ultimately there's this intersection around equity in transportation. And one of the biggest costs for the average person out there, and what has the biggest impact on their ability to lift themselves out of poverty, is actually transportation costs. And so electrification in the long term is going to help drive down transportation costs. And that's going to be really important. It has huge environmental benefits. We all talk about the idea of GHG emissions and that we need to meet climate targets, but it also has a lot of other benefits also connected to equity. But the idea of localized air pollution, so obviously a zero emission tailpipe creates a huge solution to a lot of air quality problems. But there's also down system solutions with the idea that as we reduce our dependency on oil as a transportation fuel, which currently just monopolizes transportation, then it's going to solve some of those other down system or down cycle issues. And then, as we connect to the grid and we get vehicles plugging in, it's only going to help improve the speed by which we can get renewables and other things online in the power system. And my simplest way in terms of offering that is an EV is the only car or only vehicle that's going to get cleaner over time. There's actually a recent study by Denver where they did a leaf over 3 years, and it's actually gotten cleaner since they've plugged that vehicle in. And I think is a great example. There's also a lot of opportunity around we have expanding offerings. And one of the benefits of electrification is the idea that the battery is the same battery, whether it's on a light duty car and that leaf for that, whatever it is, all the way up through medium duty, heavy duty vehicles. So as we build out the manufacturing system, we're going to be able to hit scale really fast, but we have a long ways to go, and projects like this are going to make a big difference. And then I already mentioned the opportunity to reduce oil dependency. Next slide. So, we're at this position right now, and if you look at the trends, we're moving faster than most thought we would even move. And you can look at a lot of different things out there, whether it's BNEF, the Bloomberg New Energy Finance, or other projections that talk about the idea that we might hit 50% of all vehicles sold by 2040 or thereabouts. But we have 250 million vehicles on the road in the US. And so it's going to take a big effort to move forward and really work to transition that. And fortunately, we have a once in a generational opportunity, I think, right now there's the priority at the administration, there's efforts at the state level, like what NYSERDA is proposing on the New York Clean Transportation Prizes. There's also incredible amount of state and local leadership. And then, we're right at that cost curve where technology and costs are ready. And now we just need the programs to hit that implementation faster. But we're hitting all vehicle formats. So, we used to think of it as just cars, but now it's all of the above. Next slide. So I talked about all the above, but I think this is also a great example of the idea that there are big things happening, big investments from the OEMs, big commitments being made from the folks in the fleet side. And these next three slides just kind of offer an example of those headline after headline after headline. But it does mean that we need to take, we need to harness this opportunity, because every day, that a car, that we don't move faster, it means that a car is going to be on the road for 12 to 20 years, and they're contributing to the challenges that exist with our dependency on oil or the climate or air quality issues. But there's also lots of other issues that exist there. And so I think the idea that these big investments are happening and that we have this opportunity, it is the perfect time for something like the New York Clean Transportation Prizes to be happening. And I mentioned air quality, but I think this is kind of one of those issues where it just helps identify why we have this challenge. Obviously, this is a pretty graphic example of that, but right now we're seeing the opportunity to move faster on transportation electrification, so that we don't have to look at this site moving down the road. Next slide. That being said, there are a lot of things to consider when you're thinking about the project. So large scale electrification projects are going to require thinking through a full system approach, right? So you have the idea of considering the infrastructure, and how do you align the infrastructure with any vehicle transition project that's going to take place. Where do you put the infrastructure, and how do you think about that relative to equity and other considerations that need to be thought through? You also have to think through the costs, and even though we know costs are coming down, part of the reason that programs like this need to exist is we're not at manufacturing scale. We're not at the point where we've hit that sort of cost curve reduction. It's coming, and we're almost at cost parity, but there still are higher upfront costs associated with transportation electrification. And so it's important to think about, how do we create projects that are going to address those upfront cost issues and help demonstrate the cost savings over time, which is really going to have a big impact on the success of transportation electrification. It's also going to be important to think about, how do we engage in the consumer experience, right? So, even though a huge number of people say their next car is going to be electric, we have to work faster to engage the average public. Most have not been behind the wheel of an EV. Most haven't realized they are faster, they are quieter. Most have not necessarily had the chance to even plug in a car, and that requires education. We have 100 years of internal combustion engines, and the system devoted to supporting an internal combustion engine system that we're flipping. And that means it's going to take a lot for consumers to understand the value proposition and benefits of transportation electrification. And sometimes we talk about them all as system benefits, air quality, GHG emissions, costs, but they're also tangible for the average individual, because when you plug in your vehicle overnight, it means every day you're skipping the gas station, you're reducing the amount of time that you have to spend on those kinds of experiences. I think And I'm going to wrap up here in a second. I would just say that the other thing is that we have a really great opportunity right now and a really critical opportunity. There's a global shift taking place to transportation electrification. And part of what we need to do is make sure that the US is a part of that global shift and we aren't lagging behind. And so efforts like this in New York and projects that you all and we all create on the ground in New York are going to have a huge impact on the ability for the US to make sure we're building the transportation of the future. And I just put up the last slide just for my contact info, if people want to reach out, and then passing it back to Robin.
Great, thanks, Ben. And before we transition to Mandy, just want to, I guess, revisit my comment from the last transition that looks like maybe you all don't have an everyone option for the chat. So if you put things to all panelists, we'll make sure those get relayed to the other attendees. So again, if you're interested in partnering, just drop us your name, contact information, and we'll make sure everyone sees that. And also during this transition, just put up another poll. So just wondering your main role in the transportation electrification industry. So have that up for a couple of minutes, then we'll close it and see results. So with that, going to transition to our third and final speaker today, Mandy Bishop from the City of Columbus.
Thank you, Robin. Well, I just want to thank the NYSERDA team for inviting the City of Columbus and Smart Columbus to speak today and share our experience. And I want to thank all of you and welcome all of you to what's going to be probably the ride of your career. And it's going to be a lot of fun. And I hope that you can learn a little bit from me and really choose to invest in this challenge. Next slide. So the City of Columbus won 2 awards. We won $40 million from the U.S. Department of Transportation, and we won $10 million from the Paul G. Allen Family Foundation. And we were a little bit different. We've heard a lot of conversation about electrification of the transportation sector today. We won grants that were focused on both mobility and electrifying the transportation sector. Our entire program and our application was really founded on our mayor's firm belief that mobility is the great equalizer. And I really had to think back to my single mom who always struggled to have a reliable car to get to work. She often had 1 or more jobs, and that was a constant struggle for our family. And so having transportation be an enabler and not a barrier is something that's critical to our low-income and minority communities in order just to live their best lives and do all the things that they're looking to do every day. I just want to give you a little bit of a snapshot. I'm going to talk a little bit about the USDOT portfolio first. As you can see, ours is really anchored by our Smart Columbus operating system, and then we have 3 themes: enabling technologies, enhanced human services, and emerging technologies. In all of this program, we really had the opportunity to focus on mobility, equity, and climate action. So it's a very robust program, diverse, and I'm only going to hit on a few of the USDOT projects so we can talk a little bit about the electrification side of the house today as well. Next. One of our primary applications was our multimodal trip planning application. Our application is called Pivot. You can actually download it from the Google Play or App Store. And so in Central Ohio, pre-pandemic, about 85% of our residents drove to and from work every day. And we really wanted to get more people using transit. And so we wanted to create a way to plan, reserve, and pay for your trip. And that can include the bus and a scooter, the bus and a taxi, bus and ride hail. And so we really focused on getting all of those transportation opportunities into one place. So Pivot was really an opportunity for us to decrease our single occupancy use and therefore decrease our climate impact and ultimately emissions. Next. Another theory that we had is a lot of people aren't using transit because they really need to solve that first mile or last mile trip and gap. So we built smart mobility hubs. We built them along our bus rapid transit line. It was an investment that was already made through our Central Ohio Transit Authority. And we built smart mobility hubs that included an interactive kiosk, which also hosted our pivot application, so people could plan and book, plan their trip on the smart mobility hub kiosk. They could also book a bike share, ride hail, taxi. We did have opportunity for car share, but we don't have car share in Columbus that is widespread. But we really wanted to bring transportation solutions and also scooters to those hubs that people could get off the bus and grab on and get to their final destination. That we thought would help more people shift to public transportation and therefore, again, reducing our climate impact. Our event parking management app, we talk about it in a way that speaks about events because we were really, when we conceptualized this program, really looking at our emissions in our downtown and Short North area, which is a very mixed use development, vibrant shopping, entertainment district. And we really wanted to get more people to come downtown, efficiently find parking, not be circling around, waiting in lines. So we created an application where you could plan, reserve, and pay for your parking space in a garage. You had a space in a garage, not the space. And ultimately, this application, it can also help you find on-street parking. We created a feature in our Park Columbus app, which is our white label app from Park Mobile, that allow people to see red, yellow, green and their probability of finding a space in a particular block on street, therefore reducing their travel time and emissions. And so the point of me sharing these three different projects, there's a lot of ways to tackle climate change. Electrification is a great way, especially in a region that drives a lot, and it has to be part of your climate action strategy. But you can also do a lot of things to solve challenges in your community around mobility and transportation. Next. And so I want to talk a little bit about the Paul G. Allen family philanthropy priorities. We had 5. Ben left us off this slide, but the Electrification Coalition did support this program with some on-site staff even. Our strategy was really focused on decarbonizing the grid, electrifying both the public sector, so fleets and private sector fleets, and getting more people to buy cars, people like you and me, transitioning more people to transit, autonomous, and multimodal options, which we largely delivered through the USDOT program, and then installing charging infrastructure to support it. Next slide. And so for the city of Columbus, one of the things that we really focused on was electrifying our fleet. We purchased over 200 cars ourselves, most of them being leased. We did purchase some Chevy Bolts and some Ford Fusions. We helped our Coda Bus electrify. We helped other municipalities in our county electrify. We offered a $3,000 incentive. We worked with 450 private fleets, and we also had 40 TSPs electrify, including one of our primary taxi cabs, Yellow Cab. Next. We also built the infrastructure to support our program. You can see just one of our locations here. Next. But the real things that I want you to hear is what we learned. One of the things that's not on my slide, I want to echo Bret's statement. Get your utilities involved early. If electrification is part of your strategy, it's imperative that you do so to understand where you have capacity, access, and where you don't. That can be the bigger part of your expenditures. And so that speaks to, it's complex, it's hard. You're going to have a lot of people helping you and a lot of stakeholders and a lot of partners. Get the right people on the bus and get them in the right seats. I was not the first program manager for Smart Columbus. I was the second. I was recruited to come course correct and actually reorganize the program and get everybody moving the right way. It's okay to make those changes because you don't know exactly what you're getting into until you deliver, but be prepared to deliver. As far as stakeholders, engage them early and often. have a regular line of communication. There's going to be a lot of people that really want to be involved and really want to help. Get those people engaged, set up regular cadences, but also learn how to manage that, because that can create, it's a lot of excitement for a lot of people, but it's also a lot of, it's a lot to manage. But do continue to have a cadence, keep people updated, keep people engaged, just touch base. We had a partnership manager for a long time, and then I took over that role after he retired. Partners versus vendors. You're going to have a whole bunch of people throwing a lot at you, wanting to be part of your strategy and part of your program, and that's great. But recognize if they're offering a partnership that's of value to you, or they're really a vendor offering something where you're going to have to pay probably more than you would have if you competitively select it. We had a partner that offered us something at $2.6 million. Ultimately, we were unable to accept that due to federal procurement rules. And when we competitively selected, it only cost us $1 million. So just take some time and do some analysis around those things, and you can really help your program in the long run. Next. So recommendations. One of the reasons we were chosen is because we're going to leverage the funds to solve real community challenges, and we did. Again, as part of our strategy to address climate change, we had to address single occupancy vehicles, and we did. We sold over 3,200 cars. We increased EV sales from 0.37% to over, oh goodness. We increased it by almost 500%. I can't do my math anymore. 2% month over month is what we increased it to. So a huge jump for us. We also looked at some of we were vulnerable in our application, and we shared what was great about our community, but we also shared what was not so great. One of our applications that was got most attention is called our prenatal trip assistance application, where we work to get moms-to-be to medical care so that they could have better birth outcomes by getting to full-term birth. We looked at everything through an equity lens, and we did really well with launching our program both community-wide in our low-income and minority opportunity neighborhood, Linden. And we really tried to focus on that as we deployed the complete program and make it a priority so that we could level the playing field and get people the tools they needed. Moonshot. Don't be afraid to try. We failed. We tried to build a common payment system, and we weren't able to do it when the pandemic hit. A lot of vendors lost a lot of revenues and didn't have the technical support that they did. But you know what? We knew it was going to be hard anyway, and the pandemic was the final straw that kind of killed it. But if you don't try, you don't know if you can actually get there. Again, engage stakeholders early and often and learn how to manage them quickly and well. And then one of our biggest lessons learned was think about ownership and sustainability and scalability beyond what you're doing just now. We developed nearly all of our projects with long-term sustainability in mind, and we were able to integrate the long-term business owner during the planning and development so they were vested and ready to sustain it. Specifically, our Park Columbus app was one good example. Next. I just want to invite everyone to go check out our website. You can go to columbus.gov/smartcolumbus. We have a playbook. We have our project information. You can learn a lot more than what I can share in a little bit over 10 minutes here, but it does give our path to SMART. You can reach out to me directly to get more information. But our playbook is where we share all of our lessons learned about many of the projects, our experiences, perspectives, and it's a great way to take a look. Next. And be focused on your outcomes. You get entrenched in the work, but we were all doing this to improve the lives of our residents and improve operations in the city. So as you work through it, think about what your outcomes are, think about the impact you're going to have, and don't lose sight of that. It will be hard, it will be difficult, but you will get it done. Final slide. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mandy. So I know we've been putting some reminders into the chat, but just a reminder that we have the Q&A function. So if you have any questions, just pop them in there and we'll address them to the specific panelists or to everyone, depending on the question. So just a couple of things to get us started, which I think I'll field. There are a couple of questions kind of about the eligibility of the program. So I will just note that the full specifics of rules and proposal and rubric and all of that information is located on the prize websites. So again, if you start at the nycleantransportationprizes.org, that's the portal page for the entire program. And then you can, from there, go into the specifics of the individual 3 challenges, clean neighborhoods, electric mobility, and electric truck and bus. And each of them has a specific rules page with the solutions or geographic or principal organization eligibility. So all of the information can be found there, but just a quick one in terms of, and this is a question that we get often from NYSERDA, given that we are a New York State agency, is whether or not you have to be in New York or New York State based in order to apply or be eligible to receive funding. So just want to acknowledge that this is a series of global innovation challenges. There is not a requirement that you are based in New York State. However, this program is going to the benefit of our underserved communities here in New York State. So the locations where the solutions are actually implemented will naturally have to be in the state. But if you're a solution provider from New York or elsewhere in the US or anywhere globally, you are welcome to participate, given that you also fall into the eligible categories for principal organization. So just wanted to address that one quickly at the outset. Just going to double check here. So, and again, another just kind of logistics based question of whether or not you could register multiple users per team. So the system, the websites do enable registration for multiple team members, and then ultimately whomever will be leading the application will submit the proposal. But if you're interested in, if you have multiple team members who are interested in getting access to the proposal forms, there are some rubrics on the websites, or excuse me, forums on the websites, so that you could be corresponding with other participants, doing more of this kind of matchmaking that we've been trying to facilitate in the chat. You can also register to get access to that and to kind of raise your hand there and correspond with other participants. So yes, you are able to register more than one entity, so long as whomever ultimately submits the proposal is an eligible lead organization. All right, so I'm going to take a couple of these questions to the panelists then. You're here to listen to them and not me. One specific question we have is how we should think about stakeholder engagement. So I think this is something that Mandy especially highlighted in her remarks. So I think maybe I'll start there, Mandy, if you have some advice as these potential proposers are looking to identify partners or looking to the stakeholders in these specific communities. How can they be thinking about who those stakeholders are, how to make sure that they're properly engaged, and in particular, those that need to be brought on earlier in the process, such as a utility, as we mentioned?
Sure. I would really look at your project through a partner and stakeholder lens. Partners are going to be those people that help you deliver the project. Stakeholders are going to be those that are going to help you contribute and shape the project in addition to. Get your partners on board early, help everyone understand their role. We use what's called a RACI, so roles and responsibilities matrix, responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. So everybody was clear about their role and responsibility. That wasn't put in place until I got there, and it was very cumbersome and challenging when people thought it was their role to do something and it ultimately was not. So that is my recommendation, is everybody identify what your needs are for your project or program, identify your partners and stakeholders, and then make sure that you understand who's responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed.
Thanks, Mandy. Ben, I want to also pitch that question to you, especially given all of the work that your organization does in the stakeholder engagement world.
Yeah, I think, it's good to think about things from an ecosystem perspective, and the sort of, while it can sometimes be more complicated, I think there are great opportunities to play to sort of the benefits of different stakeholders and the strengths, and realizing that in many ways, a lot of the setup can be focused around what is the communications role of the project and why does that matter and how does that help engage a broader community? What's the technical side? And so do you have a partner within that ecosystem that can focus on supporting some of the technical issues that can arise or might come out of this? What's the data side? So are there parts of this where you're tracking and thinking about, measurement, evaluation, and learning? Those are all sort of different parts of the ecosystem. But I think in general, this is a transportation electrification, and transportation in general touches everyone. So there's a car in 93% of households, right? And so the idea that there's a big, huge tent to be able to engage, I think is good to think about, and then how it can fill into your project.
Thanks, Ben. So I am seeing also a couple of questions about what we mean by disadvantaged or impacted communities. And I will just note that that is something that is, there is an interim definition that the state is using, and included in our prize websites and in the resources, there's a map tool. So you can go there, it will identify for you which areas in the state qualify given the interim definition, and what those specific criteria are. And it also has the utility territories. So you can identify, are you in Con Ed territory? Are you in National Grid territory, et cetera, in the state? So there, for the Clean Neighborhoods and Electric Mobility Challenge, it is required that you are benefiting one or more disadvantaged communities per that definition. And then in order to receive the higher scores for electric truck and bus challenge, your efforts need to be guided toward one of those communities as well. So that is something that is a state definition that is applicable to this program. Okay, let's see. There is a question about, sorry, let's see, types of, so I'm getting a lot of questions about like what solutions are eligible, and is my company eligible, is what we do eligible, and that's not something that we're going to address here. I would just again encourage you to go to the specific websites, and then on each website for the challenge, there's either, as we show on the screen, for the entire program, there's this inquiry questions tracker, or if you're interested in one of the specific challenges, there is a contact email for all of those as well. So for example, questions@cleanneighborhoodschallenge.org. So addressing all of the inquiries to those specific areas. So looking at some additional trends, also just one of the questions is about sort of personal mobility or personal options versus goods movements. And just want to note that in addition to the challenge that is electric truck and bus, which could include delivery fleets, there's the Clean Neighborhoods Challenge, which is looking holistically at some of these community benefits. So I think it didn't come out as much in the remarks. So wanted to throw to the panelists if you have any high-level thoughts on trends in particular in the goods movement versus people movement space.
I'm happy to jump in briefly. I think there's a couple things. One is, even just as recently as 2 or 3 years ago, there weren't realistic technology solutions when it comes to the movement of goods and services with electrification, and now that's happening. And I think also, so that the manufacturers are building the trucks, And it's refrigerated trucks all the way up through Class 8. And it's really kind of an amazing thing that we've made that kind of big technology jump. But there are, still a lot of things to figure out in that process. And so there are things around how do you deal with demand response? How do you deal with the infrastructure needs to support that? Or even by way of example, IKEA is working to electrify its entire fleet in the city of New York right now, and they don't own their trucks. So they have to think through the process of how do they support the contracted services to be able to electrify that system. So there's a lot of need for solutions and testing and proof of concept. And I think that's what's really exciting about a focus on freight and delivery of goods.
I'll throw.
I'd like to.
Oh. Britt, do you want to jump in there?
I was going to say I'd like to. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Mandy. I'll follow.
I was just going to say, I'm seeing a more trend with freight movement also wanting to be connected to our infrastructure. So, regardless of electrification, we're looking to also conserve tailpipe emissions. We did a portion of our connected vehicle project that was freight signal priority to help continue to keep the trucks moving through the corridor so we didn't see those stop starts. We're starting to look at that more broadly through traffic safety maintenance operations, which is more of a federal term, TSMO. So we're seeing much more integration in connected vehicle technology with our infrastructure to reduce emissions and demand on battery as well.
Great. And I was just going to add that we're already seeing interest across, as Ben said, up through Class 8, customers interested in electrifying. And that goes from, small delivery vans up through drinks delivery, which is, big, heavy load, heavier duty vehicle. And it seems like in a lot of ways, the denser territories can actually be a pretty good fit for electrification because there really aren't all that many vehicle miles traveled in a day. Some delivery companies have said they might travel something like 6 miles during an entire day, just in the world that we live in, going from block to block to block within a certain region of the city. And so when you think about optimizing costs, you can really get a lot out of the charging infrastructure just from charging, for example, overnight on some L2 chargers. So I think in a denser territory, there can be some nice opportunities for electrification that may not quite be cost effective when it comes to the infrastructure in a more extended territory. Another thing that Ben said that I just wanted to piggyback on is, as you think about the model and sort of how you're partnering with your team, there is always this interesting configuration between who owns the vehicles, who owns the charging infrastructure, where is everything parking, who's operating the vehicles, and it's often not the same entity. And so, you want to think carefully about how the project is going to be financed, where the risk sits, and how you're really going to put together a viable team to kind of meet all those different components of a project. And lastly, just when you think about especially the people movement, as I mentioned, you're not necessarily seeing a lot of LMI customers buying personal cars right now, but there are a whole host of options. There's Access-a-Ride, Elder Transit, obviously municipal transit. There's scooters and mopeds and all sorts of different bikes, e-bikes, and all sorts of different vehicles that can really be tailored to different communities and different riders.
Thanks, Britt. So with that, I'm going to wrap up the webinar. So thank you all for joining us, and a huge thank you again to our 3 speakers, Britt, Ben, and Mandy. Thank you all for your questions. As I noted, there were a lot that were kind of more about eligibility, so please do visit the websites, and if you have additional questions, you can direct them to the contact emails there. So just a few reminders that this webinar was recorded and will be posted on the resources pages on the websites. Reminder that the registration deadline in order to submit a proposal is July 22nd at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And the proposal deadlines are between August 24th and 26th, depending on the challenge. We will be hosting our second of the 3 series on May 18th at 5 p.m. Eastern. That's focused on successful partnerships and teaming. So I think we'll be digging in a lot more and echoing what you heard from the panelists today and some of Mandy's takeaways in particular. And again, please visit nycleantransportationprizes.org for more information on the prizes and to apply and spread the word. So thank you all. And
Thank
have a
you.
good rest of your day.